I'd like to invite all four speakers up to the podium we've got 10 or 15 minutes left in this session for a question and answer session from the audience. So we've got Kim and Nicole have got microphones, so if you put your hand up and they'll run to you with the microphone, and if you could introduce yourself briefly before asking each question, it'd be really helpful as well. Thank you. I'll just leave the floor to the speakers and to Kim and Nicole now. We've already got a question from Thibaut.
Thibaut Parfia. Well, you know me.
You're recording people like that.
Okay. Lyon Vet School. It's a question for Sibylle. So you look at the impact of animal movement ban, assuming that the disease is transmitted only through animals. It's a vector-borne disease. How resilient is your advice and your movement controls, knowing that wind carry the vectors?
I realize that. So wind doesn't kind of respect borders, and images might be getting blown over. But I mean, in the model we have, this vector-borne spread, and there is always a risk. I mean, the movement restriction zones will only limit spread through livestock movements. But looking at all of these simulations that we conducted, and also viewing, so I mostly used historical livestock movement data, so we have also this vector-borne spread implemented in the model, and he used climate projection data and so on. It still looked little, but of course that's a concern, and we might actually look into this a little bit further. And I know you've done some work on this, so I might pick your brain.
Yeah, informed question.
We sit
Thank
down.
you. Dominic Mellor, Public Health Scotland. My question is for Giles, and you can sit down, it's okay. So you make a very persuasive argument for doing those sort of things. How far away are we from having sort of standards for that kind of, and do you perceive that there's a need to have standards in doing that kind of approach?
I'm not aware of any standards in this approach. I might be wrong, and I'd be interested. Oh, apparently I'm wrong. Maybe. I'm not aware of any standards, but as I said, I think we need to think about to what use are you putting the model, and therefore what do the synthetic data need, how similar do they need to be depending on the model.
Good morning, Ian Duncan Miller, a farmer from Highland, Perthshire. My question is to Giles.
I went first, I'm meant to get the fewest questions.
Okay, I'll still go with my question. What difference to your work and to the industry do you see with the coming introduction of UHF EID for cattle, which will give us real-time information?
Okay. In terms of what I'm doing, because this is about anonymizing the data, there is no difference. Okay, it doesn't matter that it's real time. However, I accept that in terms of modeling the spread of disease, having real-time data, and we actually, EPIC looked at this for Scottish Government, so should they be actually having the recorders on the back of trucks, because we know that trucks go to multiple farms and animals are moved off trucks and on trucks because obviously they're a last in, first out system, and if you put animals on in one order and then you have to take them off not in the reverse order, it may be that when you go to market you unload the whole of your truck to get the first group out that go to market and then reload the truck with the animals and go elsewhere. We looked at that. It's very difficult to get data at the moment on how much that's happening. But from what we could see, what we could look at is how many movements occur within an area on the same day. And there didn't appear to be a massive amount of that happening, as far as we could tell from the data that we could see. And it may be completely wrong because we didn't have access to the hauliers' data about exactly what they were doing. I think it'll make a difference. Not in terms of what I'm talking about here about anonymizing data, but in terms of when an outbreak happens, if we know exactly where animals are and exactly where they have been, and if they have been on 5 farms or on a truck, and that truck has visited 5 farms, and we know about that, that will make a massive difference. It'll make a big difference to tracing efforts as well, which increases the amount of work that the official vets have to do, potentially.
Hi, Stephen Thompson here from SRUC. 2 questions really. The last paper where you're talking about restriction zones, it's quite interesting to see the number of movement restrictions that are predicted. The key question there is, what are the movements that are restricted? So are the dairy calves coming off of dairy farms that don't have the scope to keep them? That's the big question, rather than finishing animals that are moving around. So the question always is, what are we restricting, and what is the scope for actually managing them on the farms if there are restriction movements? And the second question, sorry Giles, back to you, is in your anonymisation of data, are you building in roads and rivers, which are the natural barriers to contiguous touch-in of animals between fences and stuff like that, and they do act as a bit of a natural barrier? And then on the distribution of animals within farms on different fields, we've kind of looked at this in Welsh modelling and doing stuff for the Welsh Government on economic modelling. We've been trying to allocate livestock to fields, so I'll have a chat with you at some point on that.
Yeah, that'd be very useful. Yeah. You want to start?
Just coming back to your first question, so we are also doing some follow-up analyses now, and we are in communication with Animal Health and Welfare. I am doing some analyses on the actual production types and so on to get a better understanding and to make, more informed or give more information, useful information to the Scottish Government. And I mean, I'm not making decisions, but and I think that will in any case be done in communication with everyone involved, so every stakeholder involved. But we are doing more follow-up analyses on this to, inform that better.
And in terms of things like rivers and roads, we are looking at also using land use data rather than just the farm locations. I didn't include it there, but we will be looking at land use data, yeah.
Ian McKendrick, BioSS. Sorry, Giles. This one's for you. I think we can see opportunities arising in terms of using satellite imagery and feeding it through machine learning to actually identify animals on the ground. Can you see value in us looking at that in the future to integrate that kind of additional data source with the government-derived data that we have already?
Short answer, yes. Longer answer, I think it would be very interesting. I mean, you're sort of then going towards what Stephen was talking about, in that we have some data that gives us what areas we are likely to find animals, because presumably that, however good it is, it won't identify every single animal in the country, but it might identify areas where we see lots of cattle or lots of sheep or lots of what we think might be housing for pigs or poultry. And we can then use that to impute other areas where it might be likely. So yes, I do see a role for that, yeah, definitely.
Hi, Lisa Bowden, University of Edinburgh. So I have a two-part question, and the latter part is quite a wide-ranging question, but I was quite curious from Niamh's presentation and everything that's been said around how you combine what are really important, messy, qualitative data that are now available and online, and especially I was quite interested in the way you're approaching online communities in an ethnographic way with the data that we have that's collected sort of and automated. And then the second part of that question is in sort of this is quite a big question, I hope I can articulate it well, but I was very interested in what Sibylle talked about in terms of the use of AI and adaptive control measures, and it occurred to me when you're speaking that we are looking at this as a single risk and risk management problem at the moment, blue tongue and blue tongue control, but if you were thinking as big as AI, then there will be numerous parameters that might feed into decision making where the outcome might not be disease control and eradication of blue tongue, but might be around how do you business as usual in the rural economy and bring in lots of different strands. So where do you see the parameters of that going? And I guess in that there is a link there presumably between some of the things that Niamh was talking about that might inform that, or there might be other types of data that go beyond agricultural data that would inform what it means to think of a single risk in a very complex risk landscape.
I'd be really interested to start those conversations. I often think that the job of a social scientist is to make the situation messier and to take one question and turn it into a whole lot more, kind of ask back. But I'd be really interested to kind of talk with my colleagues in EPIC about how to integrate that, more granular, more context-specific approach with the overview that maybe big data can provide.
Yeah, so that's a quite complicated question, I have to say. So I think, integrating, we need this kind of multi-level data approach, I think, to do this. And of course, also right now, there are multiple disease outbreaks going on at the same time and different measures, but, the farms are located in different zones, AI protection, also avian influenza protection zones, blue tongue zones, and so on. So I'm not sure what would be, this is, I think, also a research area where you have to look into what would be the maybe minimal data set that you would need to kind of predict risk for multiple things, and of course also including farmer behavior and find also workable solutions for farmers, and so that's quite complex. So I'm not sure I have the answer. But.
So, just to speak back, I suppose the question is relating the fact that we're thinking about the risk is a multi-risk landscape, but the policy landscape is a multi-policy landscape as well, and linking the two with these systems, I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Can I just say just one really short point? I think one thing that we learnt from COVID is that minimising disease is not the only consideration we have to have, and perhaps within EPIC we tend to be concentrating on minimising disease, and maybe we shouldn't.
Just one more quick question from the front.
Yeah, very short question. I'm Roland Salmon, I'm a medical epidemiologist. However, I also have a brother and sister-in-law who keep backyard poultry, and I saw some of their attitudes reflected in your excellent presentation. But the question they asked me, but which I couldn't answer, but I suspect either your people in the room can, is what do we consider to be the contribution of backyard poultry to the spread of HPAI?
I don't think we know. I think it depends who we ask. The backyard keepers would say it's nothing to do with them. Whereas maybe commercial keepers would say it's everything to do with them. I think it may be somewhere in between.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And please thank all four speakers.